everybody. Welcome back to Archaeology with Flint Dibble. I'm here with a great friend of the channel, Erika from Gutsick Gibbon. Let's give everybody 2 seconds by playing the intro music to get some butts in the seats. All right, so here we are. Thank you, Erika, for joining me. It's been about a year since we last chatted, I guess.
Yeah,
I was on your channel for the hominin lady thing, which I still need to release my video. Yours came out, and then my cancer treatment was flaring, and I sort of dropped it in the middle. And yeah,
you've got a good excuse, I think. I think you've got a really solid excuse for that. People can wait. It'll come out, and then
it'll come out. And in fact, one of my questions from my patrons for you is about the hominin lady situation, so we'll get to that. But we're here today to talk about Graecopithecus, fun new hominin, newish hominin ape, whatever you want to call it. We'll get into that in a second, I imagine. What's your thought? Is it the base of the hominin lineage?
I think it's probably a stem hominid or a stem hominin, and we can talk about what stem versus crown means here in a second. But I'm also apprehensive. Like, I don't like to say that something is something for sure unless we can say that. And I think we need a lot more information than a femur to say that. Even if you can say, and I'll say this too, about the authors do a really good job about being, well, they do a mostly good job, I'll say, about being pretty appropriate with their language. Like, they're like, this is consistent with this hypothesis, but that is not where the popular press took it, which is a tale as old as time.
Yeah, I pulled up a couple of these press articles. For example, Europe was the birthplace of mankind, not Africa. Or did the first human ancestors originate in the Balkans?
Yeah,
the problem with how the press sort of frames it.
Yeah. Well, like, I don't know. I said this to you before we started, but we've seen this before with the Miocene apes. So for those of you who might not know, the Miocene is an epoch that's a part of the Neogene period. It lasts from about 23-ish million years ago to about 5-ish million years ago, give or take a couple 100,000 years on either end of that. And it's kind of notorious because it's the epoch of time that we see the origin of the apes, the origin of the families within the apes, so the first gibbons and then the first great apes. Obviously, that means it's the first hominins or critters, the apes that are on our side of the split after humans and chimps. So it's a very sexy time period for that reason. And it means that whenever we find like one new thing with regard to the Miocene, because it's the origin of the apes, theoretically, you can spin that as this is where this changes human evolution and our conception of human evolution. I'm, again, apprehensive on that. Like, I think you're going to have to put it, I think we need to be talking about hominins if you're going to be saying that this changes our conception of the origin of humans. And that's even if we're considering hominin the definition of a human, which I don't even know if that's appropriate. I would argue that putting it at genus Homo is probably better, but people love upsetting out of Africa. That's been a theme that we've seen as well over the past 20 years. And of course, what I was going to say when I said we've seen this a lot over the 20 years in the first place was this change of the origin of hominins or hominines. We saw this with Oreopithecus, we saw this with Danuvius, and now we're seeing it with Graecopithecus to varying degrees of support. And we're going to get into that in a second too.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, just to frame this for everybody, this is what the Miocene is, something like 16, 17 million years ago till about 6-ish million years ago, right?
I'd go 23 to 5,
23
because
to
you've
5.
got
All right, this
yeah,
graph is wrong then.
yeah, that's what I'd say. And the reason is just because, the dating has got a lot tighter. Like, I've run into this problem too, where you got these really beautiful figures, but then they're from, like, 1980, and so, like, a ton is wrong with them. You're like, "Update this, please. I wanna use it, but I want it to be right."
And I noticed that I was looking for a clip of you talking about Graecopithecus. I didn't find a video you've done on it. You've not covered it yet, have you?
No, so I have a video. Shamefully, I have a video on the Miocene apes, and I
Mhm,
made it
mhm.
before I started really digging into my dissertation and doing my literature search and making my comps list, which is sort of your background dissertation information that theoretically you can then drop right into your dissertation itself. And I think probably 30 to 40% of what I say in that video is out of date. And
Yeah.
so I need to take it down is what I need to do. But the reason why I haven't talked about it since then is because, as we'll probably talk about, the Miocene is incredibly contentious in a couple of very specific ways. And it's unique because we have so many fossils from apes and from stem catarrhines that are maybe apes from this epoch of time. They're just hard to parse. So,
Mhm.
we've got a too many fossils problem, and that's a nice problem to have, but, you know
A too many fossils problem. I never thought a bioanthropologist who studies the Miocene would say something like that. I'm
well,
shocked.
they're all teeth. I mean, they're all teeth and little bits and scraps of different things, and so they can tell us a lot, but a lot of the stuff that's missing is going to play into what I think is being stated or overstated by the press today. I mean, there's a joke that, and I can't remember who said it, but when I decided I want to work on the Miocene, my very first year of my doctoral program, someone was like, "Oh, the Miocene, like where careers go to die because it's an impossible epic to parse." There's so much stuff going on, and a lot of that has to do with the where and the when. So, like, do you want me to give like a brief overview of that, like a bird's eye view of like what's
Yeah, let's do
happened?
it. Let's do the bird's eye view of this.
Yeah. So apes, or hominoids, are thought to have begun in Eastern Africa, or see their emergence in Eastern Africa in places like Kenya and Tanzania and Uganda. And they are just extremely speciose when they first show up. But by and large, they look a lot like monkeys. The way that you clock them as apes, as hominoids, has to do with minutia of their teeth mostly. And then when you've got some really nice preserved skeletons from like a Kembo or proconsul from Rusinga Island, you can look at these guys and say, okay, we know they're apes. They don't have a tail. They've got these dexterous hands. They've got these Y5 molar patterns. They've got all the characteristics that you would define, or that you would sort of pin to a bona fide ape. And when I say ape, I'm including gibbons. I'm saying, bonobos, chimps, gorillas, orangutans, humans, and the hylobatids or the gibbons. And so what's weird about the Miocene is that the Miocene starts to sort of ramp up and get really, really warm from 23 million years ago to its climatic optimum around 16 million years ago. And at that point, forests begin to stretch far to the north and allow, as you can see in this picture here, the apes to just disperse like gangbusters. I mean, they go everywhere. They infect all of Europe and all of Asia, and they're diversifying in these unique ways. And they stop looking more like monkeys with a handful of ape characteristics, and they start to experiment with locomotion, or like how they move. So they start doing suspensory stuff, and they start doing occasionally some terrestrial stuff, as we'll see today. And they do, if you believe the stuff with Danuvius, extended limb clambering, or like walking upright in the trees, kind of like how gibbons do today when they're not brachiating. But as the Miocene climatic optimum draws to a close, it starts getting super cold again. And that drives the forests down back towards the equator, and the apes go extinct as those forests disappear. Or they disperse back into the places where we find them today, which we'll talk
Mhm.
about that a little bit too. And it is from these apes, like around 7 million years ago, that you get the first hominins, or critters on our side of the human chimp split. And hominins are clocked like by a couple of characteristics, but mostly it's a reduction in the canine teeth and traits related to bipedalism. So you can see where this is going.
I still
That
got
it's like,
some canines.
yeah, yeah. No, we got them. We got them. They're just wimpy compared to to like look at a gibbon's canines. Like, oh, I wish.
Oh yeah.
God, I wish. Yeah, but it's like, we get these things that are actually on our side of things showing up in Africa around 7 million years ago. And that's where this new femur comes in. Because if the first traits that clock a hominin are related to the teeth and a more upright stance and terrestrial bipedal locomotion, probably due in part to the loss of the trees, you got an upright ape in the trees and you take away the trees, you get an upright ape on the ground. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well.
Hey,
But
wait,
it's
wait.
like,
Let me get this chat going. So, chat,
yeah.
tell me what kind of characteristics you can see in bones that indicate individuals are walking on 2 legs rather than 4. How are we going to find bipedalism from this kind of record? I do this with my students, so let's see what the chat comes up with. All right, go on. Sorry.
Please. I want to see. I want to see the characteristics that I parrot ad nauseum on my channel for clocking biped.
Yeah, let's see how good my followers are. Who knows? I've never covered this with them, so I have no idea. Yeah.
Right. No, I'm psyched.
I'll be intrigued to see the guesses that they come up with, and
Yeah,
maybe
and
some from yours.
that's going to be a great lead into this femur, because this femur from Graecopithecus, a Miocene ape, has a handful of characteristics that suggest that it was probably walking upright. And it's in Bulgaria. So it's not in Africa. It's 7.2 million years old, so a little bit older than the split, but it is not in Africa, and it's showing some traits that we typically link with hominins. Does that mean it's a hominin? According to the popular press, it means it's the father of all of humanity, right? Or the mother. It's a female is the idea, given the dimorphism of Graecopithecus. But it's like, we'll get into that.
Okay, we have some good chats here. So we'll get into this one because this is what we're talking about, the hip ball and socket joint. So obviously that ball is what we have on the femur. And so we'll be talking about that a lot in a second. Someone else mentions larger femurs than arm bones. So yeah, you could imagine you're swinging in the trees. You're going to have more developed arms than legs. And all of a sudden you're walking on 2 legs and bam. How the foot evolved. Let's go into how the foot evolved. How does the foot evolve for bipedalism?
Yeah, let's get into all 3 of these kind of at once. So you can see my poor one-legged skeleton back here, and he's got 1 leg because I've got my removed leg here to look at up close once we get to the stuff with the femur. But like, there's a lot of stuff that's related to bipedalism. First and foremost, it's how you stand, right? Like, being upright. And that's what we were talking about with some of these Miocene apes, because they have an upright posture, even though they're in the trees, because they're hanging below those branches.
And by the way, since we're talking about, a Greek ape, we have to point out that bipedalism is, well, I guess it's Latin, isn't it? Damn. Never mind. 2 feet is what it comes from.
Yeah. 2 foot. Right. 2 foot by 2.
Yeah.
Yes, you being upright means you got that hole at the base of the skull, the foramen magnum, and it's tucked forward so that your spine, your skull,
which they got.
Hey, let's go! Yeah. I love seeing that. But that just tells you about the posture. That doesn't necessarily clock bipedalism per se, although.
And just so people understand the foramen magnum, what that is that's the hole at the bottom of your skull. You could imagine if you're on 4 feet like a dog, that's going to be towards the back of the skull because it's connecting to the vertebra that way. All of a sudden, if you're standing upright, it's going to be at the bottom of the skull.
Yeah, exactly. It's got to move forward so that you can hold that vertebral column directly below you. But in addition to that, right, you can see that the hips have these nice sagittally oriented or front to back oriented blades that helps anchor your gluteal muscles, and it also strengthens the pelvic floor. Let's go, ilium ischia.
And in fact, what you were just mentioning, the way the muscles are anchored to the hips.
Yeah, exactly. A chimpanzee or Hispanopithecus or Rudopithecus, I should say Rudopithecus specifically, because that's the one that we've got this a little bit of pelvic material for. They got this really tall ilium and a really tall ischium that kind of runs side to side instead of front to back, because these guys don't need to anchor these thick butt muscles to stand upright. You got the S-shaped spine that helps you sort of keep your weight in a column. And there are several bits of minutia that we could talk about, but then you move to the leg and aspects of the femur and aspects of the foot. So we'll do the foot first, since the femur is the highlight of everything today. I think the most obvious thing is probably something that everybody appreciates, which is your toe is in line. Your big toe is in line with the rest of the little toes. It's not abducted or like off to the side, but it runs more or less in line with the rest. And that allows you to toe off. When you walk, you strike with your heel and you roll that weight through. and then you push off with that hallux or big toe. And in addition, you've got 3 arches in your foot, right? So you've got 2 longitudinal arches that run long ways on either the sort of medial or inside, got a dog hair right here, on the medial or inside portion of the foot, and then the lateral or outside portion of the foot. And you have a transverse arch in the middle. And these guys are great for shock absorption and then rolling that weight through. A chimpanzee, for example, has 0 arches. We have 3. So yeah, arch foot, nailed it. Exactly.
Erika, I'm not sure if you're needed. The chat's getting this all.
I know. I guess I just didn't need to go through it. What a waste of time. But then there's aspects of the femur, which is what we're talking about today. So the femur is your thigh bone. And as chat sort of got at, the way that the ball of the femur, the head, fits into the socket or the acetabulum of the pelvis is important. Specifically, the size of the ball and the length of the neck. So that we've got a really long femoral neck. And we're going to talk about this with relation to Graecopithecus, but the way that we distribute bone in this head and neck is really, really important because it's not a static thing. The way you distribute cortical bone, or like the tough outer portion of your bone, is remodeled throughout your life. So you can actually take an x-ray of like a tennis player's arm, and if they're right-handed, there's going to be a difference in the cortical bone distribution in their right arm versus their left arm. And that's in accordance with Wolff's law, which is how bone is remodeled. So in a human, we deposit a ton of cortical bone on the underside or inferior portion of this femoral neck. And so you get this asymmetric distribution where there's less cortical bone on the top and more on the bottom. Chimps, it's equal top and bottom because they're not putting so much pressure on that femoral neck, so much weight on it, on that inferior portion all the time. So if you find that asymmetric distribution of cortical bone, that suggests that you're looking at a biped. Likewise, if you look at the knee and like how this femur makes contact with the upper portion of the tibia here, you can see it comes in at an angle, right? That's a valgus knee or a harsh bicondylar angle. And what that allows us to do, again, is hold our weight sort of in a singular column as we move. Chimps have straight up and down femora, asterisk, because you can actually see some valgus knees in savannah chimps, who are the most bipedal of all of the chimps, which is interesting in and of itself.
Interesting.
And then there's all these little muscle attachment sites like the linea aspera on the back, which helps anchor some muscles that are pretty important to bipedalism. And you can look at the obturator groove and a bunch of minutiae that we won't really talk about, except to say when we see them like in things like Graecopithecus or Oren, which is going to be a hominin that's compared a lot to Graecopithecus. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And then there's like minutiae that I didn't talk about. So those are like the primary characteristics I would say that you would use to clock a biped in the fossil record.
So a few interesting things from the chat. One is Dr. Dino, aptly named, is saying, human evolution of bipedalism has some really interesting parallels with how some dinosaurs became quadrupeds. So many minor skeletal modifications that mean so much. So,
My dog's right on that.
It's this kind of attention to detail. And then Deep Burrito, since he gave me a nice super chat, he's wondering, why does he walk on his toes more often than not? I don't know. I know that like a lot of quadrupeds walk on their toes. Like ballerinas almost, like sheep, goat, whatever, they're all on their toes and on the tip of their toes even. Why would a human walk on their toes though?
I think it tends to be a sensory thing with humans, right? Or like you're just sort of monitoring or what's the word I'm looking for, policing how you walk on different substrates. I mean, the default way that we walk is heel strike, roll forward, toe off. But like, there are certain conditions when I walk on my toes too. So it
like
just
when you're on coals.
Yeah, like when you're or tack or glass. All the times that happens to me, I find myself in that situation just nonstop,
So Graecopithecus, then let's think about this. Why is this such a big deal? Is it just because it's in Greece, or is it like there's a lot to it? It was discovered about 10 years ago or so, right?
Yeah, so Graecopithecus is originally known from mandibular material, and its close relative Oreopithecus has a little bit of postcranial stuff in some digits, if memory serves. Yeah. So it's like, when we initially found this thing, we looked at it and we're like, okay, it's another Miocene ape. It's a European Miocene ape, again, like doing Miocene ape stuff. And it and Oreopithecus are a little bit interesting in that they've got reduced canines, which is interesting to me. That has some implications about what we're going to talk about today, but maybe not as strong as people might suggest them to be. We'll get there.
What's up with reduced canines, or you want to save that for a second?
Yeah, I mean, we can talk about like in hominins in general.
Yeah, because that's sort of like a sexually dimorphic trait, right? Where
Yeah.
males in the past of our lineage had much larger canines than females, but we lose them. Is that just because in general we've lost a lot of our sexually dimorphic skeletal traits?
Yeah, I mean, that's the $1,000,000 question. We can look at like living apes or living primates in general, which have monomorphic canines and see sort of what unites them, right? So in things like gibbons, right, male and female gibbons have the same size canine teeth, but instead of being small, they're both huge. And the reason is because female gibbons, just like male gibbons, are assholes, right? They're really territorial. Like they'll beat the crap out of anybody who comes into their territory, which they defend jointly. Same thing you see with tamarins and marmosets, where like they're little monkeys, but they have really big canine teeth for their size, and males and females both have big canines. And then you have Calicebus or titi monkeys, which is actually what they're called, where males and females both have teeny tiny little canine teeth.
Hmm.
And the one thing that unites all of these guys is a non polygynous mating system. So males and females pair bond. And the thing is that in my opinion, what this is primarily driven by, you sort of have two pathways to monomorphism, and one of the pathways gets big canines for both, and one of the pathways gives little canines to both. And if both have big canines, I think that's probably driven by female aggression and female intolerance. So it's basically like females need the big canines because they're just as aggressive as the males for defending resources or territory. And if they both get little, that's relaxed male aggression. So that's basically males reducing their aggression down to like the typical female level, and like they're both kind of chill. Like they don't, they're not trying to fight beat the crap
This
out of
doesn't
each
make
other.
sense for humans because we're all assholes, aren't we?
I know, right? I know. I know.
Maybe.
The $1,000,000 question, like I said.
So I guess female empowerment is wearing Dracula sort of teeth.
Oh yeah, and working out. So
Yeah, exactly.
beat each other up. Yeah, it's a weird thing, and it's thought to be one of the things that defines hominins in part because, like, you see Archaeopithecus, one of the first, like, I would say Archaeopithecus is one of the first hominins that there's no controversy that it's a hominin. Like, pretty much everybody is on board with Archaeopithecus at 4.4 million years ago, hominin for sure. Whereas with Sahelanthropus and Auroran, there gets to be a little bit of controversy. But what's neat about these guys is that they're monomorphic. Males and females have the same size canine teeth, and they have the same body size too. And that's weird because right after these guys, you have Australopithecus, and Australopithecus is monomorphic in the teeth, but really dimorphic in body size. So males are like really big and females really small in Australopithecus. And I think that speaks to two things. One, human evolution isn't linear. And two, like social systems can change and they drive morphologic change. So sort of a combination of things there.
Yeah, I think that this is something to make sure to emphasize to people that we oftentimes have this picture of like human evolution is like a family tree, and where it's sort of linear, moving towards simpler to more advanced or whatever kind of thing. But a lot of people have started to, oh no, no, no. A lot of people have started to conceptualize it as a braided stream where there's a lot of sort of intermingling and branching off and then coming back together, as opposed to just a tree that branches out, if you see what I mean.
And there's more than one way to be a hominin. Like there's more than one way to be human. I was, I'm doing a video on this exact topic right now. And I was talking about how it's like, okay, you go back in time, you've got these horses with 3 toes. And it's like, they're not trying to be a 1-toed horse. They're doing great at being a horse with 3 toes. Or like you've got these whales that have legs in the Eocene. They're not modern whales, but they are whales. And they're not trying to lose those legs. They're doing great at being legged whales. And in the same way, Miocene apes or non-human hominins, they're killing it at being that type of hominin. They're thriving in their environment. They're not trying to be us.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we could almost think of it like this, where things are mixing around, mingling together, and there's no one direction to evolution because, of course, the criteria for what's natural, adaptation is going to change based on the environment, based on what the goals are, et cetera. Yeah. So
for sure.
we
and that's a perfect segue. That's a perfect segue to talking about this femur. So we've got this Graecopithecus femur. It shows up in Bulgaria. It's dated, it's called the Asmaki femur, and it's dated to about 7.2 million years of age. And when you look at this thing, it's really interesting because it's got a mix of derived or more modern hominy-looking characteristics and basal or more ancient Miocene ape-looking characteristics.
Mhm.
And primarily what they harp on the most as being like the most hominin-y is it's got a long femoral neck. Like if you look at that thing, then the neck of the femur is long. They've got some comparisons of it alongside chimps, alongside other Miocene apes, and then scroll down a little bit, Flint, pull that back
Yeah,
up
no,
and
wait, I'm
scroll
zoomed
down
in
a
on
little bit.
yeah, I know. You wanna get the
Go to the
comparison
bone.
photo.
Yeah.
Go
And
to
then we
go to
want to
what?
see go to the that exact picture, scroll down just a little bit to the black and white portion. Yeah,
Oh.
that's fine. I was going to do the cortical bone next, but we can do this too. So this is a comparison of our Graecopithecus to the far left, and then you've got a hominin right there in the middle, and then you've got a chimpanzee over there on the right. And you can see that the length of the neck for Graecopithecus is more like a hominin than it is like a
Mhm.
chimp, and it's also angled more like a hominin than it is like a
Yeah.
chimp, suggesting that it's got this more human-like configuration, or a more bipedal like configuration. Because what this tells us, especially in the context of these other Miocene apes, is that bipedalism might not be limited to hominins. And I'm going to explain like why that might be here in a second, hopefully. But go back to the other picture that you had a little bit. Yeah, right there. Zoom in on that black and white bit.
So this
That
is the cross
is
section of the
our
bone in like a CT scan, I guess.
Yeah, and so what you can see is that for Graecopithecus, which I believe is H in the upper left there, it has that asymmetric cortical bone distribution, more like I than it is like K. I believe K is the chimpanzee, if memory serves. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, Pan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
K is Pan. And then J is Mesopithecus, which is another prime, or I should say catarrhine that isn't a hominin. And then you have I, which is a hominin, and then you have H, which is Graecopithecus. And that cortical bone looks more like us than it does
Mhm.
like a chimp. So does that tell us that Graecopithecus is a hominin? No, it tells us Graecopithecus walked upright, right? It tells us that it walked upright sometimes. Now we can ask the question, does that mean that it's a hominin? Like, does bipedalism, do bipedal
Wait a
characteristics go
second.
hand
Wait a
in hand
second.
with being a hominin?
I gotta interrupt you. I'm sorry. I gotta correct you. Don't you mean
Please.
trabecular bone, not cortical?
Uh, mm, 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 mm. It's both. I mean, hold on. Cortical. Yeah, it should be both.
Okay.
It should be both because it's the relationship of, trabecular and cortical are synonyms, are they not?
No, so
Tra-
the cortical is the exterior part. The trabecular is this interior spongy bone.
yeah, cancel. So no. So I'm definitely talking about cortical here. So
Okay.
cortical bone, because it's, you see the cortical
So
bone
it's
and the
not this
trabecular
interior
bone.
part that you're talking about. It's the exterior part that you're talking
Well,
about.
it's both, because that outer part, you can see it makes a nice circle, and then there's
Mhm.
a nice circle in the spongy bone or the trabecular bone or the cancellous bone, like whatever you want to call it, there in the core.
Mhm.
And then, so what you get is you end up with an asymmetrical distribution of cortical and trabecular bone. You see
Okay.
what I
I
mean?
misunderstood
So
what you were saying about it. Okay, I
yeah,
gotcha.
so it's really,
Yeah.
really thick there at the inferior portion and really, really thin at the top. And that gives an asymmetric look to the spongy bone too, to the
Yeah.
trabecular bone as well. So you
Okay.
end up with sort of like they're both asymmetrical.
In a sense, it's thicker in one area and thinner in another. The cortical
Yeah.
area.
And it makes the trabecular look lopsided, not
Yeah.
circular like it
Yeah.
does in the chimp. Um, so this is weird, right? Because we've got something that's clearly got this bipedal signal in something that is maybe a hominin or maybe not. And
Maybe
what
an
the
ape. Definitely an
authors
ape.
definitely an ape, definitely an ape. And what the authors are saying is that this thing's an African ape. So hominin is an African ape. It's something that's in the group of humans, chimps, bonobos, and gorillas. And so they're
Mhm.
like, this thing's definitely a hominin, and they're careful not to say that this is a hominin, which is fair, because despite the signals that you can see here, there are also a boatload of signals in this femur that are not bipedal, that pull it more in favor of the primitive typical Miocene ape condition. And
Okay.
that's why they're careful to say, this thing
So
isn't
what's a hominine?
what is a hominin?
Yeah, like, what is it? What does that mean? Is it a hominin-like, or is it like a larger category
Yeah,
that includes
so
hominins and hominoids and things like that?
let's go broad to specific. If you're an ape, you're a hominoid, OID, right?
Okay.
That's gibbons, uh, all great apes, and that includes humans, right? And then you go a little bit more specific, hominid, that's ID, and those are just great apes. So that's gorillas, chimps, bonobos, humans, and orangutans. Go another level specific to just African great apes, that's Hominin. And that's going to be gorillas, chimps, bonobos, and humans only.
Okay.
So orangs get booted from the club at that point.
Goodbye,
and then
orang.
more specific than that, hominin is the colloquial version of like it's just on the human side of things.
Okay, this makes sense.
So
Yeah.
these guys are African apes, and they're not in Africa. They're in Bulgaria. Like that's cool. That's interesting in and of itself. But I don't think that that's new, right? Like we have many hominines that are not in Africa because the African fossil record from the Miocene is dog water. It's horrible. Like there's nothing there, like for the end Miocene, except for Equatorius and then these hominins. So I don't know that it's fair to say necessarily that hominines for sure started in Europe, but that is what the fossil record seems to be suggesting now. The bigger question is, did hominins start in Europe and then get driven into Africa by climatic change? And then you've got sort of an into Africa and then later on out of Africa again kind of situation. And that's the $1 million question for these bipedal characteristics. Is bipedalism limited to hominins? And I have what I think the answer is to that question, but I don't know if it's the answer.
Is that what your dissertation's on, or what is your dissertation on? Let's take a pause for a second.
And my dissertation's on canine teeth. So my dissertation is on not anything close to this. And I should have said that from the top. Like I know Miocene apes, but I'm not like a late Miocene ape bipedalism specialist. So like I can give you the bird's eye view of this, but I'm sure, David Begun is gonna, and he's one of the authors on this paper, he's gonna give you probably a more specific argument for why he's saying the things that he's saying. Although I do disagree with him on a couple of things.
But you're really into canines, huh? I did not know that. All right. We'll have to get you back on to talk canines at some point.
Yeah. That's why I have so much to say about whether or not this is actually a hominin specific trait. And it is, but with an asterisk.
Yeah.
Like it's and that's the spoiler alert. I'll just get to this. It's the same with bipedalism. Bipedalism is specific to hominins, asterisk, because hominins engage in a very specific type of obligate bipedalism, like that when we come to the ground, we must walk upright, because it's like everybody else, chimps, gorillas, bonobos, orangs, gibbons, they walk upright now. They just don't do it very often.
They choose when they want to. Yeah.
Right. And the conditions in which they engage in this bipedalism are specific to, like with gibbons, it's when they come to the ground because their arms are too long, or when they're walking along the tops of the branches. With chimps, it's usually when they're feeding. They get on two legs and stabilize themselves with one arm, and then they feed with the other. So it's like, what that's telling us is that there are many reasons to be upright. Not like being upright is not a human specific thing. So what happens if you're upright and you come to the ground?
My mom's dog, we can get her to jump upright. So, yeah.
Exactly. And the difference here is critical, which is it's that cortical bone, right? Like Graecopithecus it's not just that it could walk upright like a chimp. It was walking upright and walking upright a lot. That's what that cortical bone is telling us. But does that mean it's a hominin?
So, all right, is that a factor of remodeling during life because of stress on the bone then? Okay. So this is not something that's genetic. This is something that's environmental from the stress and the remodeling.
Yeah, so the architecture of the neck is going to be genetic, but how that cortical bone is redistributed is certainly Wolff's law in action to some degree.
Okay, that makes sense.
So it's like this thing was walking upright. Now the question is, does that make it a hominin? And I would argue no. And in part because we've had two other hominoids living in Europe that have been proposed exactly as Graecopithecus is right now. We saw this with Danuvius guggenmossi in Germany, who's been proposed to be upright but on the tops of the branches. And then we've seen it with Oreopithecus too, being proposed to be literally everything. Like Oreopithecus is a mess. I don't know what the hell is going on with that thing. I don't know what's happening with that.
They like Oreos at least.
Yeah, the cookie ape.
The cookie ape. We have an interesting question in the chat. Erika, in your professional opinion, what branch of hominid would you classify Joe Rogan as?
He's a stem ape for sure. I wouldn't even put him crown group. I'd say he's a stem hominid, something like that. And Joe Rogan is unique because he's the only one of our apes that is a current knuckle walker, like a Miocene ape is a current knuckle walker instead of just inferred.
I mean, I think he's probably one of those Bondo apes that he yells about all the time. So
yeah. I know it,
I
man.
played that clip last week when I had Justine Warren on. Oh my god.
Well, he would know more than a primatologist, so
Yeah, exactly. Seriously.
I thought
Let
of him. There's a poster at the ABAs this year of a cranium that's been sitting in a museum that's been proposed by some people to be a hybrid of a gorilla and a chimp because it's
Huh.
got this weird mix of morphology. And so they did some GM on it. I think it was GM to see if it could be, and the answer was maybe. I
Okay.
guess. Like, I mean,
Real clear answer.
yeah, I mean,
I
you know,
mean, one of them and some geometric morphometrics ain't gonna necessarily answer that, but
well,
yeah.
and it's a poster, I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
I that's like very preliminary stuff. I say as I present a poster for you. But,
No, of course.
yeah, so it's like, let me take a step back and put it this way, right? Why do apes walk bipedally? There's a lot of different reasons to walk bipedally. But at
Yeah.
least in the case of hominins, the reason, at least my favorite hypothesis, and the one that I think has the most support for it, is that if you have an ape that's upright in the trees and you remove the trees, you get something that's more predisposed to walking upright on the ground. And if conditions demand it, and when I say conditions demand it, I mean if the tree cover is shrinking and you have to come down from the trees and walk from tree patch to tree patch, you've got a pressure to be more efficient at that bipedalism. But you also have a pressure to stick around in the trees some because you're not making complicated tools. You don't have fire, right? So how are you going to defend yourself against the enormous predators that live in your landscape? You got to go back up into the trees. So you're going to maintain some aspects of being good in the trees, which is exactly what we see in hominins, bona fide hominins like Archaeopithecus and Australopithecus. So if that's the case, and that's a relationship that we can at least plausibly propose, reduce the tree cover, increase efficiency for bipedalism. And if we see the climate changing during the Miocene from 16 million years onwards, starting north and south and shrinking towards the equator, why wouldn't we expect similar pressures to result in bipedal adaptations in things that aren't hominins?
So what you're arguing for is convergent evolution, it sounds like.
Yeah, and that's something that we see constantly in apes. I
Yeah.
mean, apes
And
converge
evolutionary
on
records in general. Yeah.
and evolutionary records in general, right? So, like, and to be clear, I'm not saying that that is what's happening. I'm saying that's possible. That's a
Yeah.
plausible
It's a
explanation for
plausible
what we see.
hypothesis. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason I'm saying that is because we do see specifically in Miocene apes a lot of convergence. And I would argue too, while there are characteristics in this Graecopithecus femur that they are very similar to hominins, but the thing that it's most similar to is one of our most basal hominins, Aurorantuganensis, who some people don't think is a hominin.
Huh.
You see what I mean? So that's why I started with saying the most uncontroversial earliest hominin is Ardipithecus, not Auroran. Now, I happen to think Auroran is a hominin. In fact, I happen to think Sahelanthropus might be a hominin, pending a lot of additional work. I'm not sold on it, but I'm not of the school that it's like a chimp or a gorilla. You know what I mean? But that would mean that Graecopithecus is like as hominin-y as Auroran in that femur, but when we look at those canines, it doesn't look like a hominin to me, right? Like, at least if we're lumping Oreopithecus in with this as well, because Oreopithecus, if memory serves, has a better canine record than Graecopithecus does. But Auroran's canines, they're hominin-like. It doesn't, they wear at the tip, right? They don't keep themselves sharp, like they're not honing very often, and they're the same size between the sexes. We don't see that same pattern in Graecopithecus's canines. So what that would suggest is either that aspects of bipedalism evolved before the reduction of the canines, which maybe, I guess that's possible, or we see convergence in bipedal adaptations in many lineages of Miocene ape. And I think that's more likely because look at Danuvius. Danuvius is way further in Germany, and it's older too than Graecopithecus, and it's proposed to have aspects that relate it to bipedalism, extended limb clambering. No one's proposing that this thing is a hominin.
So all
it's
right.
like,
Why does it matter? It sounds like we're debating whether Pluto is a planet or not.
yeah.
And so, and don't get me wrong, I fully think it does matter. I argue these things with later archaeological terminologies and stuff like that. But so, in a sense, what this is saying is if it is a hominin, then it's our ancestor. But if it's not a hominin, it's not our ancestor?
Well, that's what the popular press would say, isn't it?
So
Right?
debunk that then. What's going on?
Yeah.
Why does
For
this
sure.
argument matter, whether it's a hominin or whether it's more broadly a hominine?
I mean, on the face of it, it matters because it's cool and it's interesting and it's how we got here. And we're interested in that because it might explain in part why we look and act the way that we do. That's why we're interested in human evolution at all. But there's a part of this that matters weirdly from a sociocultural level that I think the authors and also the popular press aren't being probably as careful about it as maybe they should, which is that the popular press has spun this as humans didn't emerge in Africa, which is a dog whistle, unfortunately, for a lot of different pretty nefarious groups online. It matters in part because it's not really representing accurately, in my opinion, the nature of the find. But it also matters because this adds fuel to a lot of fires that don't even understand what the authors are saying. They don't even get the point of this paper. Let's say Graecopithecus is a hominin. For argument's sake, let's say that it is. What that would mean is that the first hominins started just outside of Africa, and then the continued climatic change drove them back into Africa. And that would have zero bearing on the origin of genus Homo, which, to my understanding, there is literally no way to make the case that genus Homo didn't begin in Africa.
No,
right?
I'm planning on having Chris Stringer back on the channel at some point. I want a full update on what's going on with Out of Africa now.
I mean, even then, Chris Stringer isn't arguing that genus Homo didn't begin in Africa. He's arguing
no, of course not. No.
He's arguing potentially that you've got some interesting things going on with the polytomy of Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Sapiens, and that maybe the common ancestor of that triad was Asian, and then some groups of it maybe came back out and went into Africa, and maybe they did some admixture there. At least that's my understanding. But when you get him on, get him to lay it out plainly, because there's so much stuff coming out, especially with the genetics of how these hominins interacted with one another. It's actually really hard for me to wrap my head around. So I'd love to hear from him on that.
Yeah, no, he's on high on my list to get on this summer, to hear about the updates on this, because he's had a lot of quotes in the press that I think have also been much like this article here that we're ragging on, that have also been, I think, twisted way out of context. And when I've approached him on Twitter, he's sort of not walked it back, but he sort of explained it with more nuance and said, "Hey, this is what I meant." And I've seen people take it out of context. By the way, Jamie Hodgkins says hi. She's in the chat saying this is great.
Hi, Jamie.
Two of my favorite people talking about a topic I was just asked about myself.
Oh, I'm glad Jamie gives the seal of approval to the explanation, because I was walking through this in my head prior to coming on here today, and I was like, okay, this makes sense to me, but I'm trying to articulate it in a way that doesn't require a semester of paleoanth.
That's always the tough thing, but I mean, you're one of the top people out there doing that kind of stuff. Community. No,
I try. But I mean, that's what this boils down to.
I mean, you're doing a better job than Dan Richards.
Oh, well, that's a low bar. That's a low bar with this kind of thing. I mean, I'm glad Jamie's here, because it's a similar issue with naledi, right? It's an equifinality issue where it's okay, it's possible that this thing belonged to the first hominin, but there's not enough to say that. We don't have enough to say that. And I would say that the signals that we do have they're not clear, right?
Let's break that down for people. Equifinality, I know we've explained this each on our channels at different points, but you never know who's in the audience right now. Equifinality means there can be multiple explanations for what you see in front of you. So there could be multiple different explanations for why this femur is so similar to humans or hominids. It could be a hominid, or it could be a separate evolution of bipedalism. And so both of these are plausible hypotheses, and we're not sure which right now.
Well, and I'll tell you what I think. I mean, I think it's actually a different third thing, which maybe I could have been clear about that earlier. I think that the characteristics for bipedalism are older than the split. Some of the characteristics for bipedalism are older than the split between humans and chimps. I think that's possible. And again, we're not talking about strict terrestrial bipedalism. We're talking about the ability to be more efficient than a chimpanzee on the ground. And I think the best support for this comes from the environment that's reconstructed for this thing. right? Like the paleo environment for Graecopithecus here, when you reconstruct it, it looks like the same paleo environment that we get for something like Archaeopithecus, which is patches of trees separated by grassland. The exact kind of environment that would select for something that's just a little bit better on its 2 feet than something like a chimp or a gorilla that don't live in these patchy environments, save the savannah chimps, which incidentally are the only chimps that have some bipedal signatures in their femora, right? Like this same pattern shows up over and over and over again, where the environment is driving these minute changes, but that doesn't mean that it's a hominin, right? Like it could mean that those characteristics exist prior to hominins. And that wouldn't mean that those traits don't still clock a hominin. It would just mean that you need more of them to clock a hominin as distinct from these pseudo facultative bipeds prior to the split.
So if bipedalism is not a feature of hominins, then what would be some of the defining features of hominins? What should we
I mean,
look for?
it would have to be a suite of characteristics related to bipedalism, not just the lengthening of the neck, but the lengthening of the neck plus the valgus knee plus a really prominent linea aspera or like obturator groove, which if memory serves, the obturator groove can't be assessed with this femur because it's damaged, I think, in that area. But like all of these minutiae of the trochanters and the condyles at the distal end of the femur, like it's a full suite instead of just like, here are a handful of traits that make it a slightly better biped, thus it's a hominin.
Yeah.
And you have to get these other characteristics too, like those canines need to be reduced. That honing complex needs to be on its way out. The wear should be apically at the tip of the tooth. And as I learned from the AABAs this past year, you need more than just the femur. You know, I mean, we've seen this
that's
problem.
what I was about to say. Yeah,
we've seen this problem with Auroran, and we've seen this problem with Sahelanthropus, and we're seeing it with Graecopithecus. But it's like, and to some degree, we see it with Kenyanthropus too, with assigning like where Kenyanthropus falls. But it's like when you got such a little material, it's hard to say that this is definitively a part of this group, or this is definitively the ancestor. Like when you look at Sahelanthropus, whether Sahelanthropus is a biped or not, it's like, okay, we've got 2 ulnae or bones of the forearm. We've got a piece of trash beat to hell femur, shaft of the femur, none, you know, at that, like not even the informative bits at the proximal end or at the distal end. And we've got that one beat up cranium. And it's like, okay, well, what are the signals that we get from this?
Which you just did a big video on, right?
Yeah. I mean, I took a lot from Scott Sayer's beautiful article on the interpersonal conflicts surrounding this thing too, which are just, I mean, devastating. But it's like you look at this thing and it's a mixed bag. I mean, the foramen magnum is anterior. Okay, that tells us that it held its body upright. Does that mean it's a biped? Not necessarily. It's like, okay, the canines are reduced. Does that mean it's a hominin? No, because we don't have a big enough sample. It could just be a female, right? Like there are females with really heavy brow ridges too. It's like, okay, well, there are aspects of the femur that we have that looks biped-y, and there are aspects of the femur that look chimpy. It's got that antero-posterior curve that looks just like a chimp, but then they argue that the actual shape of it and the distribution of some of the features on it make it look more like a biped. Okay, then it's like the arms look like it's a suspensory clamor. It's like, well, what's the picture here? Well, we have an ape that probably could do a little bipedalism and that was probably still spending a lot of time in the trees, and that, at least in the case of this individual, had reduced canine teeth. Is it a hominin? Maybe.
So, all right, we have all these species from the Miocene. How do you come down on lumping and splitting of them? Is there too much splitting going on? Is there not enough? What do you? So, first, explain what lumping and splitting is to the audience, but then tell me what your thought is.
Yeah, so lumping is kind of has a legacy in like Ernst Mayr, like all the way back in modern synthesis plus days, where it's like not every new specimen needs to be its own species, right? And it comes from this problem of like how much variation fits within a single species before we say it's too different, it should be its own species. And lumpers would say there can be a lot of variation in an individual species, especially through time. So let's lump them together and include a ton of variation in like Homo erectus or Australopithecus afarensis. And then you end up with far fewer species with a lot more variation through space and time. Whereas a splitter would say, no, all of these things, if they show enough differences that seem to pull them out of like existing known patterns of variation, then they should be a separate species. And like I hate this conversation.
Sorry, I gave you a conversation
No,
you hate.
it's okay.
You should have been like ixnay on the umplay.
No, the reason I hate it is because one of the big things that I harp on a lot, at least in extants, is that it is impossible to find a definition for species that's consistent through space and time.
Yeah.
And because of that, I would say, and I get a little, my committee will jump me, fight club my ass on this, because they're all species realists, I guess. I don't think species are real biological concepts. I think that they are really
you
useful.
sound like Ben Lamb now of Colossal
I know,
Biosciences.
I
Come
know,
on.
I know. I'm like,
we can just call them whatever we want. They're definitely dire wolves.
I know. I literally, I know. And there's a classic phrase, like I hope this is not too adult to say on this channel, but like there's a classic phrase about pornography that it's like it's hard to define what pornography is, but you know it when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think species is a little bit like that, where it's like, okay, it's really, really easy to say when two things are different species. A dog and a cat are different species, right? Like that's not hard. But the closer you get in relatedness and then also in time, the harder it is to draw that line.
Yeah.
The biological species concept isn't perfect, but neither is the phylogenetic species concept or the evolutionary species concept. And sometimes these concepts group things that we intuitively think are different, like lions and tigers, two different species. No one's going to tell you that they're the same thing, but sometimes they can produce viable offspring with each other.
Yeah.
So that violates the biological species concept. It's tough to decide how we draw these lines. And so in that case, and I would argue the reason why I say I don't think species are real biological entities because if you had a perfect fossil record of everything preserved from now to the last universal common ancestor, it would be impossible to draw species lines.
Yes,
you couldn't do
for sure.
And so biologically, in true history, I don't think species are real. However, functionally, they are real because we use them to communicate what types of things we're talking about.
Yeah.
When I say I'm talking about Canis familiaris, or Canis lupus, depending on how you split that out, you know what I'm talking about, right? When I talk about Drosophila melanogaster, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
right?
Though I think these common sense things, I mean, sorry to bring up Ben Lamb again from Colossal Biosciences, but, he says that, like, hey, these are dire wolves because they're morphologically dire wolves because they have white fur and, like, other things. And I'm just like, man, but the way we define dire wolves morphologically actually has to do with their bones and their teeth. And you've not changed any genetic components that relate to their bones and their teeth. And so in that sense, just a common sense, we know it when we see it. I get what you're saying. But at the same time, what that means is that anybody can almost say anything, which I guess is what happens to scholars anyway. But, we need to have an argument over whether Pluto's a planet,
Right. And that's true, too. This is why I say it's like there's this guy who's like absolutely camped out in my comment sections right now, who's like, Erika doesn't think species are real, but she talks about them all the time. And it's like, I don't think they're biologically real entities if we had a perfect record. That doesn't mean I don't see the utility in them. And that doesn't mean that we can't come up with some standard that applies most of the time so that we can talk about these populations of organisms. So
reminds me exactly of a question from one of my patrons, which is this second one right here. Erika, you spent years in the trenches debating creationists when they moved the goalposts using God of the gaps tactic, claiming that every new transitional fossil just creates two new gaps. How do you effectively shift the conversation back to the predictive power of the evolutionary model rather than just playing whack-a-mole with their shifting demands? And so it's the same concept here. If you don't believe in species, then all of a sudden there are no gaps, if you see what I mean, because it's just a smooth transition. But yeah.
I mean, I think this is why framing the conversation as to like what we actually expect versus what we see in accordance with the scientific method is paramount when you're talking to creationists, right? Like evolution predicts that we should see morphologic change over geologic time. And if you take a lineage in question, you have a proposed ancestral group and a proposed descendant group. The differences between the two of them should be spanned over geologic time. And the hardest gaps to span are going to be those biggest morphological jumps. So if you can show something like Australopithecus, where you've got not just an organism that in its entirety is transitional. It's got arms that are really well adapted for climbing and legs that are really well adapted for terrestrial bipedalism, but also individual bones where you have portions of the femur that are more derived and portions of the femur that are more basal. That spans the gap. Like when you're finding these transitions, like where you're creating these two new gaps, right? The actual distance that needs to be covered in those two new gaps is astronomically smaller than the gaps that needed to be crossed between the two initial ones. And so then you're playing a game of, and let me clear my throat again, hold on.
You're fine.
Then you're playing this game of what is too little and what is too much for evolution to cross. And that's when dog breeds become your best friends, right? Because like you can just look at the dog breeds and say, we know for a fact that you can go from, a wolfish looking thing to a Great Dane or to a Chihuahua.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would argue that the distance between a Great Dane and a Chihuahua, brutally speaking, morphologically, isn't that much different than the types of differences that we see between some of these hominins. And yet we know they can be spanned now. So that's the purpose of talking about these transitions, is showing a proof of concept of like, okay, we have this intermediate, and now the spans between a Miocene ape and Australopithecus or Australopithecus to a human are much more comprehensible and fit well within our understanding of evolution today in the present.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's why I asked you about lumping and splitting. So you might hate the conversation, but it was a good conversation.
Yeah. And here's the answer in a nutshell. I'm a lumper or a splitter depending on the lineage or the taxon question, right? Like I think that splitting can be really, really useful because I think that species are useful in what we're talking about. But at the same time, if lumping is better for communicating what it is that we're talking about here, then we should lump. Like, I don't think we need 8,000 subspecies of Homo sapiens when, functionally speaking, we're talking about populations.
Yeah.
I mean, at the same time, does Kenyanthropus share a lot of characteristics with Australopithecus? Yes, but they are doing slightly different things. So it almost becomes a gradistic argument to some degree, which I hate because I'm a cladist. Like I think that monophyly should be how we group these things. But the TLDR is lumping and splitting can both be useful. As usual, it doesn't need to be an all or nothing thing.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point there that a lot of it depends on context. It depends on the type of argument you're trying to make, which is, maybe in the end, paleontologists and people who study human evolution will decide that bipedalism is what defines hominids or hominins, in which case it will be a hominin because that's one of the major definition points. But that conversation is still, happening right now as we speak.
Yeah, and I think, I don't know. I think the real linchpin of this is we need more material, right? Like there are signals of this, of Graecopithecus that look hominin-y, but they happen to be the same ones that we see in Auroran too, 6 million years, right? Like 1.2 million years later. So it's like you could have a lineage there, or bipedalism could be older than we thought. And not just bipedalism, facultative, very primitive, like aspects of bipedalism could be older than we thought. It's a nuanced conversation, and it's not one that can be had or should be had by saying we found the ancestor of all humans and it lived in Bulgaria.
And I mean, I think this is an important point to make. Look, this has been a discussion that's been going on for nearly 100 years. And it's really clear that there's this trend where a lot of European scientists and ordinary people want humans to have come from Europe. And so there's this whole issue of race and geography that's all tied up in a discussion that has nothing to do with race and modern human populations, if you see what I mean. But it's about pride and stuff like that. Yeah.
And like, Flint, how far back do we want to take this? Like, okay, where did Homo sapiens begin? Genetics tells us that Homo sapiens as a species shares a last common ancestor somewhere in Eastern Africa. Okay, cool. Where did Genus Homo begin? Well, the fossil record tells us that Genus Homo, the earliest members of Genus Homo, are from Ledi in Eastern Africa. Okay, cool. Where did hominins begin? Well, when we look at the fossil record, it's either Eastern Africa or potentially just to the north of Eastern Africa, like just outside in places like Bulgaria or even further abroad in Europe, depending on whether we want to go with the molecular clock or what the fossil records say. Okay, well, where did apes begin? Well, that's back in Africa. We got to go back in Africa because the oldest apes that we have are from Eastern Africa and the likes of Proconsul and Akembo and the likes of that. Okay, where did catarrhines begin? Well, when we look at where catarrhines begin, it looks like it's in Egypt and around the Fayum with Proteopithecus or Proplyopithecus or Oligopithecus, like these kinds of guys. Okay, where did primates begin? Well, when we look at the fossil record, primates are somewhere in North America or maybe even China, depending on what we actually count as what is a primate. Okay, well, where did mammals begin? Well, when we like you can go
it's like back. Yeah, exactly. It's like this headline: did the first human ancestor originate in the Balkans? And it's like,
that's
no,
Luca.
the first
that's
human
Luca.
ancestor was a single-celled organism in the ocean. Like, that is the first human ancestor.
Where do you want to put it? You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, what counts? And it used to be, you know, that like it depends on what you mean by human. Does human mean ape? Does human mean genus Homo? Does human mean Homo sapiens? Right? What
does it
counts?
Mean animal?
That's
like,
yeah, does it mean animal? Like, that's the framing of this conversation, and that's what the popular press is sneaky about, because they want to get the clicks on the headline. And like, again, I want to stress, the authors were pretty like apprehensive and careful in most of their language. You know, I mean, this isn't necessarily on them. However, there are some interesting quotes in some of these articles that I think were a little that gave a lot of these popular press guys room to run.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, we have
and that's
to
something we talked about a lot in our naledi interview is how to actually communicate this in a way that actually will not let you as easily be clipped out of context and into ways that are that are harmful, let's say, to the discourse.
And you could fix this exactly how they could have fixed this with the naledi stuff. Instead of saying it did bury its dead, it might have. Instead of saying this is a hominin, it might be a hominid. You know what I mean? Like, you could fix a lot of problems just with careful language and then extensive elaboration in the text.
Wait, are you saying that I made a mistake by saying there is no advanced Ice Age civilization? I should have said there probably is not an advanced Ice Age civilization. I mean, called Atlantis.
I mean, I think that you're safe because your opposition is being extremely straightforward with their language. So I mean,
exactly.
And I mean, by that logic, there could be, you know, a teapot rotating the sun.
And I think that that's also a difference between how we communicate sort of more accepted scientific facts that have 100 years behind them versus the new paper that is my paper that I'm trying to convince all the scientists is actually relevant and interesting and whatnot. And so there's a big difference there. Yeah.
For sure. If we found a partial Graecopithecus skeleton and it was the spinning image of Auroran in all ways that could be compared, or Archaeopithecus in all ways that could be compared, then I think you could take a step back and say, yeah, that's the first hominin. Right. And it's from Bulgaria, and and hominins originate in Europe. But like with one femur and with other examples of bipedalism and convergent evolution rampant in hominoids in general, I don't know. I'm more apprehensive about saying that.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And I think that's is where a lot of it comes down to the ego of some of these scholars, where they really, I don't know, I guess they have a lot of confidence in their conclusions, and they're maybe a bit overconfident in that sense.
I think it's a way of, I would say it's a way of thinking, right? Like, I've got David Begun's book. He's one of the authors on this paper, and he knows more about Miocene apes than I do, for sure. Like, he's been at this for longer than I have. He's worked with a lot of this European material. For sure, he knows that stuff better than me. But at the same time, like, he's been making this argument in The Real Planet of the Apes, which is a great primer on this stuff. And he frames all of these critters as though, and this is a conversation that a point that I'm sort of stealing from somebody I had a conversation with at the ABAs this year, but he sort of frames it all as if everything has to be a crown member. Right? Like, everything has to be the ancestor of something living today. And it's like, that's not how evolution works. We know that's not how evolution works. So I'm puzzled as to why he frames it that way. Maybe he knows something that I don't, but like, I think it's fine to look at something like Graecopithecus and be like, this thing is like, maybe it's a crown hominin, maybe it's a crown hominin, or maybe it's a stem.
Yeah.
You know, maybe it's an offshoot. Most things are.
Maybe it's an evolutionary dead end, just like all the people we want to make fun of.
Exactly. I make a joke, you know, about the cognitive capabilities of some of our closest living relatives, which are immense and oftentimes get underrated. And it's like, you know, Kanzi the bonobo, I've seen Kanzi do more impressive things than I've seen flat earthers do, you know, or some young earth creationists for that matter.
You're not very nice to your opponents, but then again, I just did a whole bunch of stupid awards for my opponents. So, you know, that's okay.
Flint, I'm mean. I can be really mean when given the opportunity.
You got to be feisty in this kind of environment. I mean, you know, like I had on Todd Sturvell yesterday talking about the Clovis first stuff and whatnot. And I was like, he's like, yeah, I can't believe all the drama behind this. And I'm like, yeah, but you know, drama gets clicks, you know, that's what people are interested in. And so in that sense, I think we actually need to embrace the drama and do a little better with it so that we get people paying attention to us and hearing what we have to teach. We can still be nuanced in what we teach and still be a little dramatic about it, you know, like.
Well, I think, you know, I work with this principle on my channel. A little bit of clickbait is okay, as long as what you're clicking on provides the nuance of the matter. You know what I mean? Like a little bit of clickbait, you almost have to have that to compete with just the backwards, completely untrue clickbait that everybody with, you know, that Joe Schmo from down the road has about his Atlantis existing, or, you know, out of Atlantis, like his out of Atlantis hypothesis, right? Like, it's like, does this prove once and for all that we all came from Atlantis and we're genetically engineered by the Anunnaki or something? Like, you almost have to have a little bit of clickbait to compete with that.
No,
but
we do. I think this is what I do when I go and I give my lectures at universities and to colleagues and to PhD students, is like, we need to embrace that to a certain degree. We can't sell out. We're not here to like create a headline that actually misinforms people, like some of the headlines we've looked at. But at the same time, what we are trying to do is get people to actually pay attention to the knowledge that we have and the experience that we have. And so we need to be a little dramatic. We need to be a little clickbaity. We got to be a little, you know, have a little bit of flair to it, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's the difference, right? Is that it's like these headlines aren't necessarily, some of them are blatantly wrong, but some of them aren't necessarily wrong, but then also the body is not right. You know what I mean? Like it would be fine, it would be more fine if the title was like kind of, you know, bombastic, but then like the text clarified things, but you don't always see that. And I think that that's, you know, got to be fixed.
I agree. And I think that's going to get much worse with AI taking over with people's writing and stuff like that. That's going to get a hell of a lot worse in the end. And so, you know,
especially because I don't know if you've noticed this, but you know, when I've used AI on the times that I've been testing it, right? Like I used it for literature search when the deep research tool first came out, probably 8 months ago, maybe a year ago now.
Okay.
Because I was curious. I was like, this is awesome. Like, it's a great way to find a quote for something if it works. And so I took the quote. Yeah, I took the quote that I was looking for, put it in. It's like, yes, it's from this book on this page. And I was like, great, I have that book. So I'm gonna go to that page. It's not there.
No.
It just
I do like AI as a search engine. I find it to be a useful search engine to look for articles to complement other search engines.
But you have to check. You
yeah.
have to check.
Well, that's what I mean. As a search engine to find articles to read, and then I go read the articles, right? You know, that's what I mean. I find AI useful for that, but when it comes to it actually summarizing the content of those articles, it gets some things wrong, some things right. When you go to quote level, it is more wrong than right. It is really bad.
And I think let me get my tinfoil hat and put it on, because I think that search engines, general search engines, are being intentionally dumbed down. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Exactly.
Tell me your conspiracy, Erika. Tell me.
The Atlanteans are making search engines worse so that we have to use AI as a generic search engine. Yeah. I was looking for a picture of Oreopithecus yesterday, which is incidentally, as I was talking about, that's why I had 3-toed horses on the brain, or primitive horses on the brain. I think it actually has 4 toes on the front feet. But I was like, Oreopithecus skull. Enter Google Images. It brought up a picture of a Dmanisi cranium of a hominin, because I had the word skull, and I guess the search engine is so dog water now that it was like, oh, you want a skull?
Searches are terrible.
Like, it just doesn't work anymore.
Searches on YouTube are also pretty terrible, I've learned now. I try to find like some of my old videos that I've made that are mine so I can get a clip for it for something. I was doing this for my stupid awards. And like, I'm searching for my own video and it's not returning it. And I'm using words that I know are only exist in my video, because I had this short-lived series, which I'd like to jump up again, called Old News. and I'd
Yeah.
spell old with the E at the end, right?
Yeah.
So I'd search for old news, blah, blah, blah. And other stuff popped up that didn't even have it in there. Like, it's just the enshittification
No,
of
it's
search
so
engines.
bad.
It's real bad.
It's so bad. And that's, I mean,
And somebody
that's
just said that, yeah.
again, like, I think it drives it. Yeah, enshittification, exactly.
Yeah.
It drives us towards using like AI as a generic search engine, and it sucks because sometimes that's the only like otherwise you're not going to find the thing that you're looking for because it's literally not showing up in a basic Google search. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to burn down a small forest to get a picture of Oreopithecus. It's like, that's stupid. I don't want to do that, And so what I end up doing is I Google search and then I go to the bottom where it says show results that are not applicable. And then I scroll through a million pictures until I can find what I'm looking for. It sucks.
So that's what I find AI is a nice complement for a search engine. And it also has some things that it does that search engines can't do, which is it can search foreign language stuff by asking it in English, and it can then search a variety of foreign language stuff. And I found that to be pretty useful. And then it also doesn't just do the word that you're using. It uses synonyms and other types of things. And
it's
so
unfortunately great for checking code too. Like when I've got busted code in R that's not working, it's pretty good for being like, hey, like I'm popping this error. What does that mean? I'm not a coder. What does that mean? And it can be like, well, and it can like find where I forgot to put a comma in or something like that. But again, I'm burning down a small forest. Like,
no, it's a real problem.
What is happening?
We're going to hell in a handbasket right now
it's not
via
good.
AI and everything else, war and
it's not good.
Let's not move in this direction. Let's get away. All right, back to the Miocene apes. Tell us some good news from the world of Miocene apes.
We just last night got another. Well, this is a new Miocene ape. Like the Graecopithecus femur is a femur that's associated with Graecopithecus material. And so it's like, okay, it's a Graecopithecus femur. But we also got a new bit of mandibular material from Egypt. Just yesterday was published by Eric Seifert and his team out of Egypt. And it's like, what's it called? Masropithecus, I think. Masropithecus mandible?
Yeah, I actually saw that. I wanted to ask you about it because you even tweeted about it, didn't you?
Yeah, it's really cool. And that actually, incidentally, is what sent me down my like Oreopithecus death spiral, because they've got this phylogeny that they got from tip dating, doing Bayesian tip dating, combining molecular and morphological data sets to create this phylogenetic tree of a lot of these Miocene apes. And I was looking at it because I've been stuck in the early Miocene for a while now. And so there's this group of early Miocene apes called Neanthropiths. Sometimes they're called Neanthropithecids. And so I looked at this phylogeny that they had in this paper, and it's like, scroll down and see if you can get to, okay.
Right, I gotta get my access up.
Yeah, get your access. They've got, I don't want to spoil it. I want you to pull it up, and then I want to talk about it. Okay, scroll down to the phylogeny that they have. So they do their description of it, and it's probably
this is the lovely mandibles. They're all mandibles, aren't they? I swear.
Yeah, well, and that's mirrored too. So that's like, if you scroll back up to it, you'll notice that the really good chunk on the left is mirrored over on the right, so that you get a good idea of what it probably looks like.
Is. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's
nice
not
canines.
a complete thing. I know, and the premolars are really pretty on it too.
Yeah, really
and it's got a nice honing complex. It actually looks. I've got an Afropithecus premolar over here, mandibular premolar P3, and it looks a lot like that. Okay, scroll down to the phylogeny. Okay, here's their phylogeny. Zoom in a little more. Scroll up to Neanthropithecus pickfordi and Neanthropithecus harrisoni. Okay, so there's this group here, and it goes Wranglepithecus, check, that's a Neanthropith. Turconopithecus, check, that's a Neanthropith. You got your Neanthropithecines here, or Neanthropith groups, Vancouveringarum and Alessi, and then you got Harrisoni and Pickfordi. Hey, what's that in the middle? Oreopithecus falls in with the Neanthropiths here, which would make all Neanthropiths not Neanthropiths, but Oreopiths.
Oreos.
They'd be Oreos. They're Oreos.
They got cream in the middle and cookie on the outside. Yeah.
They're the little cookie apes. And I saw this and I was like, wait a second. And I think when I tweeted about it, I mentioned it. I was like, this is so weird. Like, Oreopithecus falls out with the Neanthropiths? I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's actually what you said. I had to see the Neanthropiths group with Oreopithecus stuff.
Yeah, I was like, that's weird, right? And then I was like reading the latest scholarship on Oreopithecus, and then I finally looked at the teeth. Oreopithecus has these funky Neanthropith molars that are really thin and like ridgy and strange. And I never noticed that in all. This just goes to show how many of these freaking Miocene apes there are, because I saw this and I was like, is that weird? And then it turns out it's not that weird. It looks like Oreopithecus might be a late surviving Neanthropith, but it's like, that's funky because this thing's in like Tuscany and all the other Neanthropiths are in Eastern Africa. Like, what happened here? And so if you scroll down a little more to the there should be, or like go to back to the paper.
Oh yeah.
And then there's another picture that shows like migration routes. Yeah, this one. Zoom in on that. It's like all normal like stuff. And then you've got Oreopithecus coming from Eastern Africa straight to Tuscany.
It's sailing across. Hey, maybe this is Atlantis. Maybe
right. It's Oreopithecus. It's the Neanthropith. Right. I mean, I'm not shocked you haven't seen that headline yet.
It's the right time. They could be in the reshot structure over here.
They're right there.
Yeah,
dude.
they're
like,
right there. Perfect. Oh my god. Oh my god. And they come through Greece and everything. It's perfect.
It's ideal. But like, I didn't know this. That it's funny because like, you know, this Masoropithecus, it's like a beautiful little jaw. Like they make a decent case that it's a part of the maybe a part of the crown hominoids. I think that's what they said. Or I can't remember if they said, no, they said crown hominoid, I think that's what they said. Anyways, or no. It would be.
They have them coming. Yeah, this is crown hominida here. Hominoidy are here.
So they've got it as just an outgroup. They've got it as just an outgroup to crown hominoid. So they're saying it's a stem hominoid. My mistake. I think I was literally right in front of my face and I misremembered it. Cool stuff. Some more similar to the hominoids than any of the other Miocene apes. And then what's really cool about it, and I'm going to make a video about this on my channel as well to talk about this a little bit more in depth, but this thing like finally makes sense of this random Graecopithecus molar that we had. I think it's a molar just up in Germany at 16 million years ago. It's like the earliest thing that's definitively European ape. And like it was like way removed from everything else. This is a nice little connection out of Africa for that. But it's weird. I don't know. The weirdest thing to me about this was my better late than never Oreopithecus revelation and Neanthropithecus connection, which I don't know, kind of blew my mind.
My mind is blown. I didn't Oreos are Atlantis. This is, you know.
I know. It writes itself, doesn't it?
Seriously. We could plug this into like AI and it would write a whole novel for us even.
I know. We can create an entire, and you know, the Oreopiths were the ones that dug into hollow earth and created the infrastructure down there, and Hitler's still hiding out down there, and like.
And guess what? This was all only 5,000 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, it's crazy. They did that to survive the Noachian deluge, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus Christ. It's all about Noah's flood in the end.
Yeah. Do your own research.
Yeah, exactly. So someone has a really good question for you. And I know you already answered this, but I think it's time for you to answer it again, which is, why is your Homo sapiens skeleton missing a leg?
Because I removed it so that I could show you femoral gross anatomy, like baby's first femoral gross anatomy. And I was doing it for a video on this exact topic beforehand that I was recording for this morning to get fresh on it. So I unscrewed it. My poor one-legged fellow back here.
Yeah.
We'll get it back.
All right. Let's move to chat questions, and let me ask you a few questions from patrons, unless you have anything else you want to talk about on this topic.
No, that's it. It's a really cool femur. I think that it's appropriate to say that it's a hominin. I don't know that we should be saying it's a crown hominin. It might be, it might not be. Same situation with it being a hominin, pending more material, but it's cool that it looks like Auroran. Hopefully they've got more stuff under their hat.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense to me. So a couple questions from members and patrons. So everybody knows, if you're a member or a patron, you get to know who's coming on and you get to ask questions in advance. So we have some good ones for you. We have good morphological predictions for the chimpanzee human last common ancestor, but the physical remains remain elusive. I like that. The remains remain elusive. Do you think we have a realistic shot at identifying a definitive last common ancestor for chimps and humans in our lifetime, or is the geological record of the Miocene simply too fragmented in the key regions we need to search?
the paleontology and the Miocene is booming right now. In fact, paleoanthropology is booming in general. There's this famous quote from Tim White from 2000 where he's like, "It sucks, but I think we've dug up all the fossils. Like we're just, paleoanth is over party, I guess. Like the fossil sites aren't yielding anymore, and it's like we've doubled the number of hominin species, and probably even more so for Miocene apes since then. So like it's a great time for paleoanthropology and paleoprimatology. The problem here is not the fossils. We're going to continue to pull up partial remains, partial skeletons, fragmentary remains. If we're lucky, we'll get something like what we have with Australopithecus africanus / Prometheus STW573, which is like a 95% complete skeleton. We have that for Oreopithecus, right? We have similar remains for Paralopithecus and Rudopithecus and Hispanopithecus. So that the problem isn't the fossils. The problem is, I think it is impossible to identify a definitive last common ancestor between humans and chimps because it's going to look like neither of them.
Yeah.
And it's going to have characteristics that are potentially derivative of one or both. And so a for sure common ancestor, like saying this is the one, is impossible for anything unless you have the genetics. But that doesn't mean you can't try, and that doesn't mean you can't point at really good candidates. Because at the end of the day, evolution isn't linear anyways. So you can find something that's like the actual last common ancestor was probably very, very similar to this. And I have ideas as to like what I think that would look like. And they might pan out and they might not. We'll see. But the current molecular clock has that, like the most recent time tree has it setting at about 6.3, 6.7, maybe 6.5, somewhere in the 6-point region, which is really interesting because that obviously would boot Sahelanthropus as a hominin, but it might make it a really good candidate for something similar to the last common ancestor between the two, or for that matter, Graecopithecus, same situation, or Auroran. And what that would mean is that the last common ancestor between humans and chimpanzees, hominins and chimpanzees, hominins and panins, was a lot more hominin-y than chimpy. And that's cool in and of itself.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's cool. Yeah, and I guess our oldest genome is only like 2 million years old, so nowhere near old enough to actually come in handy with genetics, because that stuff just doesn't preserve. Maybe we'll get some stuff from some iced areas, like glacier areas, as they melt.
I mean, I talked to some proteomics people, the ABAs this year, just very briefly, and proteomics might help, because they can last a whole lot longer.
Of course, and there's a lot more of it.
And there's a lot more, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And that stuff's so strong, there are people working on that you can just put a bone, like an archaeological bone, not a paleontological one, but you can just put it in a bag and then they can test the bag rather than having to test the bone itself. It's like it just picks
crazy.
it up. It's just
crazy.
Insane. Proteins are great. Okay, next question. Does paleoanthropology have a massive savannah bias because of how well fossils preserve in East African rift valleys? Do you both feel that our understanding of human origins is skewed because we haven't properly sampled harsher environments like the Congo Basin or West Africa? How much of our human story are we missing by ignoring the acidic soils of the rainforest where artifacts and bones rarely survive? I'll let you handle that first, and then I'll have my own answer.
Yeah,
I mean, cover it.
I don't know, and I don't even know that we can know, right? Like it's so hard to say how skewed. I mean, it's certainly skewed, right? Like we know that there are hominins in places that aren't East Africa and South Africa because when we look there, we find them, right? We have Barrel Ghazali, Australopithecus Barrel Ghazali, which is more skewed towards Central Africa. We have Sahelanthropus chinensis, which is skewed towards more skewed towards Central Africa, right? I mean, there's no reason that I can think of that a hominin wouldn't go there. Why not? You know what I mean? Like when the savannah was habitable enough, I guess I should say traversable is probably better. Traversable enough for them to get there, they would go there. We see this exact same thing with the Green Highway leading from East Africa to South Africa. When it's lush, hominins migrate down to South Africa and then they get stuck there. And when it's not lush, they don't. You have these periodic pulses of hominin migration. So I think it's definitely skewed. How skewed? I have no idea. Absolutely, the acidic soils of rainforests screw us a lot on this. We see this same thing happening in Asia with a lot of our Miocene ape material from early gibbons, early pongines, the relatives of orangutans, and the stuff that we do have is like beat to hell. So it's it's tough to say how skewed it is. Is it skewed? For sure. How skewed, I don't know.
Yeah, and I'd also argue, so what I was going to mention is similar. It's not just an issue of preservation, it's an issue of having access to the right kind of geological strata.
Yeah.
And so the Rift Valley is great because it's a rift, which is therefore exposing older soils and older sediments
Great point.
that we can actually then explore. And so I would say that the advantage here is that paleontologists, archaeologists, anthropologists, etc., they're learning how to better target sort of appropriate strata in different areas around the world. That's why these fields are exploding right now, because people are saying, all right, let's work with geologists, put together a prediction model. Where can we actually go to try to find this kind of stuff? And so, you know, as we get better at that, we're filling in gaps, though there's always going to be gaps due to preservation and just what's simply available and things like that. Yeah.
I think last thought, it's also worth noting that in Eastern Africa and in South Africa, the people that actually live there are involved. Like they know what to look for. They know when it's important. And like we don't have that same infrastructure in Central and Western Africa that we do in the East and in the South. So, you know, education and access and working with local communities is paramount.
Yeah, and that's where things like cutting U.S. aid are not helping out, because we're cutting
So
off
bad.
education and access and our ability to be able to, like, you know, cross-fertilize.
Like
in that
so
sense,
bad, it's unreal.
Yeah, it was
So
real bad. It's real bad. Okay, let's see what else we got. We have, yeah, so any updates on the hominid situation? Also, please tell her that I think she's fantastic and her channel is wonderful. Do you have any updates on the hominid situation?
Not since the 5.5-hour video or whatever it was. I kind of got everything out of my system on that. And, you know, Rising Star's been real quiet. I actually saw a tweet on Blue Sky the other day where I forget who it was. It might have been Paige Madison or Rebecca Rex. I can't remember who it was, but somebody tweeted and they were like, it's been real quiet out of Rising Star. Everybody, it makes everybody real nervous when they get
what's coming next.
Yeah, God only knows. It's going to be like a wheel, like Naledi invented the wheel in the depths of Dmanisi in the depths of Dinaledi. So I don't know. It's such a hard thing to say. I know they had something in print when I was working on that video about the actual geology of the chute and how weird the geology of the chute actually is. And last time I checked, it was still in preprint. I don't know if it's been published. I would love to see it published. I'd love to see them maybe get a camera back there and get some 3D scans to actually see what the hell is going on, because it's a weird situation.
Yeah.
I also know that there's still been no progress on the formal publication of those fire dates. I know.
Yeah, that's like way overdue. What the hell? That should be
Yeah.
simple radiocarbon testing and just tell us that there's no friggin' old carbon in it so that we can assume it's older or not.
I mean, we already know that that's the case, because the Martin Torres paper had a bit where they were like personal communication. They cite personal communication with Lee, and Lee was like, the dates are young, at least the dates they have now. So, and maybe that's because they walked in with a torch for the recording. Like, anyways, we don't have time to get into that.
No, I was on that. Jamie's in the chat. We had her on discussing that very thing a couple of years ago. Oh my God, what a saga.
Anyways, so
we already asked. I'm gonna at some point put together a video on this. I have a couple old interviews that are slowly getting out of date, but if I get it out before they're out of date, they're still good because nothing much has happened. So
no, and one thing. I mean, I don't know. There's like. I think it's very clear, and we're all on the same page, that there's not enough evidence to say that these guys were burying their dead. Like, I think we're all on the same page with that. By the same token, it's a weird site, and I think we're all on the same page with that too. Like,
really cool
the site is weird. It's really cool. It's really weird. Like, there's other stuff in that cave, but the variation of the naledi sample is funky. It's really, they're all really similar to one another. And like, I don't know what's going on with that. Is it like a relict population that got trapped in a rainstorm or crawled back there for shelter or dumped their bodies back there? I mean, I think it's really interesting. And I know we harped on this with that big long video, but like, they really need to get like a geology team in there, like a non bias, because we're all subject to our own bias, and all of our teams and our sites are subject to the bias that our teams and our sites are subject to. So it's always good to get an outside perspective. I would love it
Yeah.
if they got an outside perspective.
No, I mean, you know, as I was just talking with Todd Sorrell yesterday, that doesn't happen very often in these fields. And I mean, I know that from my dad. My dad had access to all these sites that Francois Bourdes excavated because he was friends with the Bourdes family. And so, you know, and other people were not happy about that, but it's like,
Yeah.
but that's how these things unfortunately work, for better
Yeah.
or worse. It is a human field that studies humans, but it's also occupied by humans with all of our various flaws and good things as well. So yeah, so okay, so we have a few questions in the chat. People throw questions in the chat. Like there was a fun one that was like, when did humans first start doing puns? But I don't think we have an answer for that. All right.
Ban that person immediately. Ban
No,
them.
no, it was with the super chat, so I can't. No.
All right.
If by ban you mean encourage more puns
Yeah.
and super chats,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
So all right, you want to go first on this or me? What's the oldest bone you've ever found, Erika?
Ooh, the oldest bone I ever found, the only site that I've worked at enough to like find my own stuff would have been the West Kenya site in Tenderhead. So the oldest bone, I mean, the oldest is going to be what, 21 million years old. And it wasn't, no, it would have been a bone. The oldest tooth, like the oldest ape material that I found was probably a wrangler molar. So that would have been about that age. But like there was other bone stuff there too. I mean, ask me how many rodent incisors I found. I could, if I had $1 for every rodent incisor I found, I would be a very, very wealthy woman. Very wealthy.
Yeah, my stuff's a little younger. The oldest bone I ever found was probably aurochs bones from a Neanderthal cave in France. So something like 50 to 70,000 years ago. I still remember one of those. That was one of the reasons I became a zooarchaeologist. Was I was like, oh, I found a giant friggin' extinct cow tooth, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that certainly influenced things. What else do we have in the chat? We have all sorts of stuff. Do I have a collection of my archaeological findings? You have a collection behind you. I have stone tools, but they're modern stone tools that I use occasionally in videos to show stuff. And then I have a few chicken bones from traditional breeds chickens that I can sort of show how they're different from modern sort of drumsticks. This is a drumstick, for example. And so I have a few, but because of me being like, you know, an itinerant scholar, I have sort of my zooarchaeological collection. Part of it, I have a rabbit buried in a flower pot in Albania, in my sister-in-law's flower pot. I have material in the lab in Athens. And then I have some stuff here. I have my dad's stone tool collection, which they're again modern replicas. None of this is ancient. You can't keep ancient material, by the way, chat.
Yeah.
This is all modern
I was gonna
stuff.
say, I don't have anything.
Yeah.
I actually found sitting in my house. That would be what you call an international crime.
Yeah, exactly. This is all modern made stuff or modern animals or replicas and things like that, because that stuff is in a museum or in storage. It's you know, under lock and key
where it should be, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I have materials all over. At some point I need to gather all my shit that's in like 4 different countries and bring it together.
Under one roof.
With my family, we just inherited my dad's former dig house. And so I'm hoping to turn a portion of it into kind of a more regular archaeology lab and YouTube studio, sort of to use over the summer and stuff like that. So we have a fairly large modern lithic collection there. Jamie's been there. She's in the chat because she's worked with my dad before. What other questions? I know I missed some. Somebody asked, I'm guessing this is for you, though I'm sure the answer will be the same for me. Might there be a chance to submit relevant paleoart to be used in videos, something to spur on more artistic endeavors and fossil ape appreciation?
Always. If you draw a cool ape or a cool hominin or a cool landscape, send it to me and tell me how you'd like to be credited, and I'd love to use it. I mean, it's tough with art in general, because it's like all the art that I use, I either made, or most of the time I found it off Google Images, and I try to cite anytime that I can. That was something that I did not do early on in my channel that I should have been better on, but you kind of live and learn. Like I just didn't know I was very young when I started my channel 7 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever. So it's like I didn't appreciate like how it was supposed to be done. So I try to do my due diligence on that now. But it's hard to know sometimes what you have permission to actually use, right? So I try to err on the side of caution. Anytime that somebody sends me something and they're like, I give you express permission to use this in perpetuity, please send it to me, gutsickgibbon@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to, you know, use it with credit, or if you charge for it, tell me what you charge and I can compensate you.
Yeah, and I'd say the same thing for me, flintdibble@gmail.com. If you have any art you want included in videos on archaeology or whatnot, I'm happy to include it. I'm happy to consider paying for it, though I don't make a ton from this channel, but I'd consider it depending on what it was, and I'm more than happy to credit it and stuff like that, because good, unique art that is carefully thought through and creative is a real valuable asset for a video. You know, it's tough to, I try to make sure to credit everything. And my partner, my wife, is my graphic designer mostly. She does a lot of the graphic design and video editing stuff. But she's an archaeologist. We met in grad school, actually, which I find very, very lucky, because I think a lot of YouTubers work with sort of graphic designers and video editors who don't have a background in the field. And so they create all sorts of mistakes accidentally.
Oh yes, Flint. I do all my own work, and I am not a good editor. I try my best, but like it takes me so long to get something that an actual talented editor could do in like 6 seconds, but I'm too much of a control freak to pay for an editor and let go of the full creative control. I'm just too anal about it. So
Mr. Tabro says hi.
wow, so sweet. Oh, don't let my dog see that.
He's a dog. He's a dog, by the way. He's not a cat.
Oh,
Because
okay,
there's no difference in species, right?
It's a good point. It's a really good point. Actually, I just see two very derived single cellular organisms.
At least we're derived, okay? That's important.
Yeah.
We are definitely derived.
Right.
All right, so we have a more personal question for you. What's the biggest misconception you had when you first started your primatology path, or the most surprising thing you've learned since starting? It's crazy how little updates we get on these subjects post high school. Thanks for the super chat, by the way, Balthazar.
No, that's an awesome question. Gosh, it's hard to pick. I think we still hold on to the anagenetic or like linear way in which humans evolved a lot. Human exceptionalism, this concept of like, this is what makes humans special and wholly different from everything else across the board. And that's the sole reason why we're the only ones left. I see that one a lot. I think that, and like, that's hard to say. Cause like, I'm not even sure about this. I would wager that human innovation, Homo sapiens innovation, gives us some kind of an edge, probably. But like, the more we look into it, especially genetically, the more we found that things that like candidates that we thought were genes or physical characteristics that make humans unique and also give us an edge, what we find is that one, not all humans have them, and two, sometimes other hominins have them. And so like, then it can't be used as like that definitive thing anymore. And like, the more I spend looking, the less sure I am that there even is something that wholly separates Homo sapiens. I mean, I certainly think there's nothing that separates us categorically from everything else. I think there's a through line for everything we are and everything we do.
After all, you're an anti-speciesist, so yeah,
I'm an and I'm an anti-human exceptionalist. Like,
so you're anti-species, you're anti-humans. What are you for, Erika?
Unity. That's what it is. Like, I just everything that humans do that's unique and special, you'll find some primatologist somewhere that's going to say, I see some version of this in my study species. You know, like that's just the way that, and part of that I think is because that's how I was trained. My master's degree is primate biology, behavior, and conservation. So I come from like an ethological background of like, what do other primates do, and is it different from the things that we do? And the trend is really clear. Like, the more we observe, the more things fall away that are categorically different. So human exceptionalism, anagenesis, and I think there's another one that I see a lot. It's this sort of default that ancestral humans were like brutal, vicious, patriarchal, violent people, and that only since civilization has come along has life become good for like women or people in general. And it's like that's such a simplistic view, I think, of our history. Like humans are wildly diverse. Certainly there are
Yeah.
groups that were like that, but there were groups that weren't. There are hunter-gatherers today that are very egalitarian, for example, because it's hard to hoard resources when you get your stuff every single day. The importance of matrilines and of elder knowledge and of peacekeeping and of all of these things that are equally make us human just as much as our horrible tendencies do. So that's another one that I get annoyed seeing. Also, my dog is having a nightmare.
Oh no.
Wake up! He's deaf, so I've got to go.
If you need to go, tell me. We can end this.
No, I'll poke him. Hey, wake up! It's okay. It's okay. Here comes the other one.
There's the dogs. Doggos.
Doubles. I got the doubles. This one's my bigger of the two that's in here. I also have a third that's not even in here.
Nice.
I know.
Very nice.
Know.
Hello. How are you?
She says, "Hey." She's just checking out what's going on.
All right, let's go to one of the specific on this specific study. What was the Graecopithecus's climate and food availability? Can these changes be tracked through climatic studies?
Yeah. It lives in a sparse savannah environment pockmarked by little, I think you say copses of trees, like little patches of trees, which is classic. And they even have a bit at the end where they're like, what were the pressures for bipedalism? And it's the same song and dance that we keep seeing, or stuff that's facultatively bipedal or sometimes walks on two legs. They live in these environments that necessitate being decent on 2 feet if you're upright in the trees. So yes, we can track that. Food availability, it's pretty typical. I mean, Graecopithecus has like this pretty typical Miocene ape diet that, if memory serves, favors a form of like frugivory / occasional folivory, that kind of thing. They got the cuspy teeth for that, or not overly cuspy teeth, but like the folivore-ish adaptations in addition to general frugivory.
Okay, this makes sense. All right, do you have 5-10 minutes to answer a few more questions, or you got to go?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I don't want to keep you if you got to go.
No, you're totally good. I was just getting up to, again, he was just having a nightmare.
I just want to make sure. I think we've been going on for an hour and 40 minutes, so I don't want to, you got
if there's one thing I can do, it's talk.
Okay, well, this is a good one to talk about. I think this is actually an important question. Is there a taboo for comparing current humans in different areas, morphologically or otherwise? I never seem to find nearly any videos or papers comparing such differences. It's a tough question.
I mean, I don't know. So there's this issue, I think, in let's just call it science, right? Like in general, where it's like, we want to appreciate the differences in populations, right? As these unique adaptations to specific areas that persist. But we don't want to fall into the trap of doing race realism part 2, or really like race realism part 8, since like we keep falling into this same trap over and over and over again. I mean, there's no doubt that people that live in different areas have different physical features that seem to unite them. The problem is these physical features don't map onto any concept of race, right? Yeah. They're all localized adaptations, and they like universally show up multiple times, right? Like things like skin color or aspects of the face and skull shape or limb length, which fall in line with Allen and Bergman's rule, which are just climatic responses. So it's like these things can be talked about, but you have to be careful when you're talking about them, because as we saw with a femur from a Miocene ape, the race realists will get a hold of it and twist it into something that it's not. So you have to be careful when you have these conversations, and people are, fortunately, scientists are typically pretty careful about that. Another great example of like why this kind of stuff should be taken into account, at least sometimes, like ethnic history, I guess is the way that you would put it, is for things like medicine. Right? Like where you live and your history can have bearing on your health. So like in some senses, it is important and like should be considered. And in others, it is completely meaningless and adds nothing to our understanding of what we are and how diverse we can be. I will say I've been shooting a warning across the bow about this for about a year now. The more we sequence genomes, the more we find out that certain areas of the genome that don't really seem to do anything can differ a lot between individual people. And the reason is, it makes sense.
Yeah. It's not
they're not subject to,
selection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not subject to selection, so they're going to vary a lot. But what that means is that entire pretty big portions of the genome can duplicate or delete. And if you were to line them up and say what's the percent difference between these two, it'll erroneously seem a lot higher than it actually is. And the Human Pangenome Project is ongoing right now, and like I think that's going to, I worry, and I think probably that's going to be a headline that eventually is going to get seized on by some pretty nasty people. So I'm trying to route that off at the pass by saying there are many, many, many ways to compare genomes. You can look at protein coding regions, which is arguably the most informative. You could look at protein coding regions plus regulatory bits, but that takes a lot longer because whether something's regulatory or not is hard to determine. What it's doing, when it's doing it, like during development or maintenance, like that's tough. But like at the end of the day, no matter how you compare humans are all very, very, very similar to one another. Like in the context of species diversity, we don't have a lot of diversity as a species. And that's why it's so important to have an outgroup to compare, to say like, even if humans show up as X amount different, that's still way more similar than any two chimpanzees are to each other. We have to keep that in mind because otherwise this is going to get abused. And I dread the day, but I think it's coming.
No, and I want to reiterate that it's a really tough thing to communicate simply because when you start talking about these topics, you're immediately misinterpreted. And it's also by well-meaning people. It's because we use different terms in a different way than oftentimes how people hear it. And so what that means is it's a really difficult thing to communicate, partly because it's such a part of these culture wars and stuff that we're living through, that everything is so charged. And as soon as you start talking about that, you're political in some way or another to some large group of people. Right. And so that makes it challenging, like it's not so easy to because when we do communicate, we want to make sure that what we say is actually understood and heard in the way that we're intending it to be said and intending it to be heard. And if we know that something is not going to be heard how we want it to be intended, that's going to make us a lot less likely to speak up on it because it's very difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like the reason it's on my mind is because I did the human chimp genomic comparison. It's like the percent similarity that humans and chimpanzees are depends on what you're actually comparing. And by different methods, you're going to get wildly different numbers. And if you apply that same method within chimpanzees or within gorillas or within humans, you're going to get different numbers too. Yeah. And so this leads to people erroneously assuming that it's like, oh, two humans can be 10% different than an identical base pairs to one another. And it's like, yeah, but those are in areas that don't do anything, right? Yeah. And it doesn't matter how you compare it. Two humans are always going to be way, 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 way more similar than even two chimps are to one another.
So you do believe in species? I caught you. I'm gonna get this clip right here.
You got
like species and human exceptionalism all in one.
I know it. Well, I mean, this adds to my point, Flint, because it's like if we had every genome and laid them end to end, it would be impossible to say these belong to this.
It would also extend outside of the galaxy, probably.
I mean, honestly, oh my God, it would. Yeah, in length.
Yeah, it would be really long. All right, we have a few more. How much is the CIA paying us to suppress information about aliens?
I'm not at what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not approved to say.
See, I am approved, and it just takes $20.
Oh wow!
I'm a cheap date,
Flint's cheap.
Yeah, exactly.
My price is a lot
Whatever
higher.
I can do to support the CIA. If they chip me in a super thanks, I'm like, yeah, aliens,
You're
true
like, whatever.
aliens. Tell me what to say. It's
what do you want me to say? Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, they pay us a lot more to hide the giants. The giants are the one that they really pay the big bucks for.
Oh my God, where was that? There was I don't know if you're on the fraudulent Facebook wall of shame, but somebody posted this thread that was going on about this one of the forbidden history or something like that. And I found these comments in there. I need to do a live stream just about this thread in the comments there because it is like off the wall. But somebody is like, yeah, aliens, they're nothing. They're not a big deal. They're not a big enough deal. What they're really hiding is giants because that would blow the top off of all of evolution. Right, and it's like aliens aren't a big deal. Giants, though, they are.
Well, Flint, the actual party position for at least most young Earth creationists with aliens is aliens are definitely real, but they're demons. They're real, but they are demons, and they come from hell to capture you and probe you. I don't know. Like, I don't know what the goal is, but
Satan wants to
they're
probe
doing
you with
something.
aliens. Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing something to you for sure.
All right. We have, how long does it take for a bone to fossilize?
It depends on the conditions, and it also
Yeah.
depends on the bone, and it also depends on what you consider to be like. When do you say fossilized, you mean like full paramineralization? Like it just there's
You
so
talk to
many.
a geoarchaeologist, the
Yeah,
bone starts fossilizing immediately.
yeah,
And so
right,
they're all
right,
fossils in a sense. As soon as it's buried in the ground, it's starting to fossilize. So
yeah.
yeah.
And then others will say that it's like if you can get any biological material from it, then it's not a fossil yet, you know. But then it's like I don't know that that's fair because we have pretty dang old stuff that you can get some biomolecules from. So it depends.
Yeah. And even fully mineralizing, that's going to depend on the very context that it's buried in.
Yep.
I've seen people make arguments about fossilization and age, and it's like, yeah, that's not so easy.
Yeah.
Actually, from the same guy, you sort of already touched on this, but if you have anything to add on widely held misconceptions about primate behavior or evolution that you still see in media or education.
Primate behavior. I think we tend to present them as monoliths. Like I don't think people really appreciate just how diverse primates as an order are. They are the third largest order of mammals behind rodents and bats. So they're like pretty big. They do a lot of different things. I mean, I wrote this in a grant application once. It's like primates display the full suite of behavioral diversity that we basically see across other animals. I mean, every mating system, every social system, they live in groups of 800 strong or they're completely solitary. They pair bond monogamously and never cheat. They pair bond monogamously and do cheat. They're in polygynous relationships. They're in polyandrous relationships. They're in free-for-all promiscuous orgies, right? Like they can be super dimorphic or they can be not dimorphic at all. They can be huge. They can fit in the palm of your hand. Like they're so unbelievably
Which
diverse as a group.
is crazy because that some of these things match humans as well.
Yeah. Exactly. Humans are weird. Like we're weird because we have the inference that you could make on our biology, and then we have what we actually do, which is everything. Like there's just so many people that we just present the full suite of diversity as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes sense. I think, yeah, some of this is size of populations in a sense. All right. So how long did it take us to get to Homo neanderthalensis? I'm guessing they mean defining it, but naledi immediately gets the term Homo straight out of the gate. So what do you think about that? I think Homo naledi is pretty well accepted as part of Homo, but I don't know enough
It,
about paleontology.
it is. It
Yeah.
is. And so is Floresiensis, but that
Hmm.
doesn't mean that there aren't people who are like, is this actually appropriate? I mean, how we define Homo, there's a famous paper, 1999, Wooden Collard or Wooden Collard, however you say it, where they're like, how do we define Homo? Like, we can't. It's impossible to define genus Homo. You can do it gradistically, or at
Hmm.
least you used to be able to do it gradistically a lot easier than cladistically. And then now it's like we have Demonisi that throws a monkey wrench into things. And we have the Gona Homo erectus cranium that throws a monkey wrench into everything. And early Homo habilis throws a monkey wrench. And Australopithecus, like we have early Homo that's not doing Homo things. And then we have some late Australopithecus that's starting to do some Homo things. So like that boundary has smudged even from a gradistic sense. With a couple of minor exceptions that are going to end up booting some members of Homo erectus, if that's how you want to define it. And I think that's maybe not appropriate. And then you have like, okay, you could do it physically, but if you do it physically, I mean, we're defining Homo by like cusps of teeth. And that maybe that's appropriate. Like, again, that's how evolution works. It's like
Yeah.
very, I mean, it's this gradient where like everybody can sort of reproduce with immediately who's adjacent to them. And then you get too far and then you no longer can. So gene exchange is muddling things as well. But to answer your question, if memory serves, Homo neanderthalensis has like been in Homo virtually since the beginning.
Yeah, I
I
think right
mean,
away.
like it was Homo, it was always Homo. Now it was like barely Homo for a long time. Like a lot of people were like, it's nothing like us. They couldn't do anything like us. And then now it's, I mean, you're hard pressed to find things that archaic Homo sapiens did that Neanderthals didn't do. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, a lot of overlap there. Um, So I don't know, I hope that answers the question in maybe a roundabout way. Like, Homo's harder to define now than it ever has been. Again, because we have so many fossils and that line is so blurry.
This whole issue of gradation and lumping and splitting, it's so much fun to play with, isn't it?
It is. And,
and
like, at the end of the day, it matters, but it also doesn't. For bird's eye view, it doesn't matter, because what they show us is this impeccable, heavily detailed, breathtaking transition from this generalized Miocene ape form to a myriad of different derived hominins in their own paths. It's cool. But then it actually matters a lot, because we have to know what it is that we're talking about and where we draw these lines, albeit arbitrarily, to communicate what's happening properly and when it's happening and why it's happening. And I don't know. It's a blast.
I agree. And the next question is similar. For a species with very few or even one example, how do we factor in diet when determining things like size, when we know even one instance of significant malnutrition can have a massive change in humans? It's a good question. Yeah.
It's a great question. And I mean, the same is true
And
for,
thanks,
like,
Beth.
there's, like, anomalies. Like, there are humans that fall very well away from the average condition for humans. And so what we really rely on is the fact that fossilization is rare. And so the odds of fossilizing an anomalous, for lack of a better term, individual is pretty slim. So you're hoping that the individual that you're getting is like a representative, a good representative of their population, because it usually is, but not always, right? Like, we have samples that are heavily biased towards males, because males engage in risk-taking behavior in primates a lot more than females do. And so they tend to fossilize more, and that'll skew our understanding of that species average, because you've just got more males than females. Or maybe you'll have more young ones than older ones, because they're engaging in risk-taking behavior or getting predated on. Or you have more old individuals because they can't keep up with the group, or for this, that, and the other reason. So they can absolutely skew it. That's in part why when you do, like, GM, or for, like, geometric morphometrics, you kind of pad your analysis with a ton of extant individuals, like living individuals, to basically try to tease out that signal, whatever it is that you're looking for.
Yeah, and I'd also argue that a lot of what we do, I mean, I don't know, when I teach archaeology to students, it's sort of like you can't always use size, because
Yeah.
size is going to vary significantly. Instead, you're looking at morphology and shape. And so what that is that's comparing different measurements, or different locations, or different features. And so that's actually oftentimes what we look at. And in that way, the bias of, say, whether someone is larger or not due to nutrition is going to have less of an impact on the kind of conclusions that we make.
But even that's not guaranteed, because it's
No.
like in primatology, we're fortunate in that primates represent, like, like, a really big range. So you can have gorillas for, like, your maximum dimorphism, or mandrills, or orangs, and then you can say, okay, we'll throw gibbons and calatrichins in there to say, okay, that's what it should look like if they're not dimorphic at all. But then it's like, we know of animals that are, for instance, female bias dimorphic. How would you clock that if you don't have a clear representative in the extant sample? Or, like, what if you have something that's even more dimorphic than the most dimorphic stuff, like that's argued for Lufungpithecus? What do you do when the comparative method fails? And the answer is your best.
Yeah,
Do your best.
exactly. I mean, this is now a big question for the domestication of animals. Mindy Zeter just had a really good article a year or so ago that came out. For a long time, we've argued that when we domesticate animals, we consciously made them smaller because they were more manageable. But Dr. Zeter, she's at Smithsonian. She's a fantastic zooarchaeologist, studies domestication and stuff like that. She made a good argument that actually, when humans manage animals, what they do is they usually raise a herd that is dominated by females with only a few males, which could explain for some of the diminishing of the size that we see, because they're sexually dimorphic in terms of size. So it isn't humans selecting smaller animals, it's humans selecting breeding females for their herds.
Yeah.
And
And
so,
culling the males.
yeah, exactly. And especially because we have such few sexually dimorphic specimens, usually it's just the pelvis for, like, say, sheep and goat and cattle.
Right.
You don't have a choice, and so that's impacting all your measurements and their sizes and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, as you said, we do the best we fucking can, right? Yeah.
And, like, at the end of the day, too, it's like it's going to impact your results and your interpretation a little bit, but you're still going to be able to get a decent idea of, like, the big picture. right? Like it's going to be hard to say, okay, you know, Australopithecus has this many species and these ones are this dimorphic and ate this, and these ones are this dimorphic and ate that, and they had this mating system and that mating system. That's going to be hard. And that's where we argue at conferences, right? And in papers. But like broadly speaking, you could say, okay, but we can still characterize the genus like this. Here's the characteristics that they mostly had. Here's the things that they mostly ate. Here's the range that we think we've got. Here's how they probably moved. And that's moving us in the more right direction, as I'm sure it's the same with Zooarch.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Yeah, and that's exactly what it is taking all these different variables and trying to put them all together into something. Okay, well, it's been 2 hours. Let's not go on 4 hours. I know some people in the chat say you do that all the time, but still.
Oh, I do. It
is 8 here, so I got to go eat dinner. So somebody made the point that they just announced a second Sphinx at Giza. Go check the Ancient Architects video. I might try to do a live stream on Sunday about this. It's obviously a bunch of bullshit. There is no second Sphinx. It's all fucking bullshit. Maybe I'll see if Matt wants to join me. I don't know if he will. He's been reticent to join me for a live stream. But yeah, no, Erika, it was so great to talk with you. Thank you all for coming by. I hope that that you have a better sense of how we study Miocene apes, and I hope that we'll collaborate on more stuff in the future.
Totally.
Because it's always a pleasure talking with you. Yeah. And for everybody, we have my final ending music. Here we go. Rhymes and riddles, tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle, fiddle, flint, untibble. Rhymes and riddles, tickle, tickle, giggles, squiggle, jiggle, fiddle, tibble, 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 tibble. Love and archaeology to everybody.